am very pleased to be welcoming Amy Langer, the co-founder of Salo. At Salo, Ms. Langer drives growth and brand affinity through analysis of market gaps, architecting, and leading innovative strategy, and establishing sustainable and scalable infrastructure. Ms. Langer and Salo have been recognized locally and nationally with a wide range of awards, including the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur Magazine and the Inc. 5000. Her experience encompasses human resources, finance, and accounting. She began her career as a CPA auditor for KPMG, followed by time at one of the largest staffing agencies as their National Business Development Director. Ms. Langer also serves on the board of directors for Health Partners and Greater MSP. Thank you again for joining us today. As Steve mentioned, we will have time for questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to type your questions in the chat box throughout the presentation. We will have a recording of the presentation available for attendees. And if you have any questions about how to participate in CEO Next, please reach out to me via email after this presentation. With that, I will turn the slides over to our guest, Amy Langer.
Hello and welcome. First of all, I'd like to thank Steve and Mary for having me here today, and a big, generous thank you to the sponsors. I know it takes a lot to make these happen, and the generous donations and the involvement and the partnerships with the sponsors make a big difference. So thank you. I'm also really big believer in peer-to-peer learning cohorts. So I commend you on taking the time, because sometimes I know when you're in your business and growing it, it's like, can I take time away? Where should I do? But learning cohorts have been amazing for me over the years, and I think have been instrumental in my growth. So awesome, you're already on your way. And I'll work really hard today not to waste your time. So here's a couple of things. One, energy and wisdom are two things that I believe we get more out through an exchange. So I'm hoping today we can have an exchange of both. One, energy, that we inspire each other and really get inspired by each other. And then secondly, wisdom that we learn from each other. And that doesn't happen if I talk the entire time. So be prepared to listen, but also to participate. And I would love an exchange. So my written presentation will take about 25 to 30 minutes, giving me a lot of time to open it up to Q&A. And I just find, one, I know this is risky. You could be sitting there like, I don't want to participate, or I'm not sure, or what about this question? But what I do know is that if I can spark some curiosity and spark some questions in you, the dialogue is usually richer. And so I'm confident that you'll find me vulnerable and authentic today. And through that, you'll want to give me your stories too. And you want to hear just not stories of what I want you to hear. So please think about that. And you can have this chat function is awesome to get us started. And then we'll go from there. So with that, I think I'll jump right in. I'm going to start with my early years and really kind of tell you about my journey. And then bring it back to a few stories around lessons that I've learned, and then we're going to open it up. So in the early years, I believe that so much of the why, the passion, the purpose of an entrepreneurial business is based on the why, the passion, and the purpose of the founder. And for me, that starts way back. I would imagine that's the same for you as well. I grew up on a dairy farm in Michigan. You can see a picture of it here. And you can imagine you don't sit around much on a dairy farm. You learn early the value about hard work, not only long hours, but pitching into the job is done. My first job was picking rocks from our family farm and driving a tractor to bale hay. We worked hard on the farm, and I remember being really happy. I have two brothers and all male cousins. So I was really always surrounded with people, and they were always pushing me and trying to like stay involved and stay up with all the boys around the farm was something I always did. During the 80s, farms across the US, including ours, were struggling. Our family was also struggling. Within 1 year, when we were around 13. I say we because I have a twin brother. My parents were divorced. We lost our family farm, and suddenly the happy days of our youth were disrupted. My mom was left with 3 children, a failing farm, a failing business, and no college education, and went to work as a billing collector. As you can probably imagine, that was a pivotal year for me. That was a marker when I really had to decide intentionally about what I was going to do in my life. I only knew a small town, I only knew a farm, but I happened to be pretty good with my grades, and I was really involved in a lot of things. And so I knew I needed an education to be able to do something different and not have that be my outcome. I had to figure something out, and that's what I did. I went to school at Michigan State University. I love that place. It was the only college campus I had ever been on in my life. And the reason I had been there is because I was a really good dairy showman. I used to show dairy cattle when I was little. And when you go to state, you go to campus. And I fell in love with Michigan State. I still have a deep affinity for it today. And other than some financial aid and a few scholarships, I really worked my way through Michigan State to earn a bachelor's degree in accounting. I averaged between 30 and 40 hours a week working while taking a full-time schedule to support my education, and just so grateful and thankful. And part of why I got an accounting degree is I knew I wanted to be in business, but I also knew I needed a job. I had to have one coming out, and someone said accounting was hard. And if you want to be in business, you should learn the language. And that is why I got my accounting degree. And then somebody said, hey, if you have an accounting degree and your grades are pretty good, you should go work at one of these big firms. And that's how I got to Minnesota. So grateful. KPMG, the Minneapolis office, hired me. The first time I was in Minnesota was for my office interview, and the second day was the day I moved. And lo and behold, I thought I would be here 2 years and move back to Michigan. And now it's been, can't do the math, 25 years that I've been here, and I'm so grateful and love this business environment. So my early work history, I had 2 jobs before I started Salo. And they were also instrumental, I believe, in why Salo is what it is today, and really the why. So let me explain. First, I was at KPMG. I was hired to be an accountant, actually an auditor. And I love so many things about KPMG. I love the culture. I love the people. I love that there was so much learning. I constantly got to learn about new businesses. I loved being challenged and the long-term nature that they put on relationships. So what was the problem? I realized this, and it actually came from a time where what I realize now is that many times that are hard in our life are our biggest learnings. So I had to take the CPA exam, and I was with multiple people who were taking the CPA exam were taking it and passing it with flying colors. I took it once and failed. I took it twice and failed. And that second time really put me in a deep depression. And so it was another real big pivot point for me, because I said, why? I'm top of my class at KPMG. Why am I not doing it? And I realized it was that I really didn't love the work. When some of my peers were talking about the technical aspects of accounting, that was not what was exciting me. What was exciting me about was the teams, working with clients, understanding the business, bringing people together. And so I sort of cataloged that at the time and realized that if we continued, these people, my peers, who were really, really good at finance, and really, really good at the technical piece, would outpace me. And so I really thought, how can I find something that would use more of my skills and still kind of utilize my accounting background. The end is I did take the CPA exam the 3rd time. I did finally pass, thank goodness, but it really kind of helped me as a pivot point. So loving the culture was one, but now I wanted to find a place where I love my work. And so I did go to Robert Half International, and I was hired to sell accounting services and start sort of a business for them at more kind of a senior level accounting and finance business. And I did well. It was awesome. I was the top salesperson in the world. I ran a division that was top in the world. And then I started to do some national work that allowed me to travel, to see the country, which I had never seen before. I loved running a sales team. So it was like, oh, is this perfect? And I would say no. So what was the problem there? For me, I didn't love the culture. There was like a short-term nature of decision making. I didn't love the lack of transparency, the volume-based nature of the relationships. It just didn't seem to fit who I was and where I wanted to be. This is where I met my now current business partner, John Folkestad. And on 9/11, it was just sort of a crisp, clear thing that became really clear for me that I didn't see myself working for this company long term where I didn't share the values. So I left shortly thereafter and sat out a non-compete. So that brings us to Salo. In October of 2002, John Folkestad and I set out to build a company. And Salo was built with the idea that if you build a culture based on the relationship, not the transaction, and you pay close attention and let people do the work that they love, that something great could really happen. So that's the premise. And we've done it. We kind of aligned our why and our vision. John and I have very, very different styles. And I think that's kind of made us, I'll talk about it a little bit. That's kind of been really amazing part of what makes Salo great. And it's also been really challenging over the time. We each own 50% of the business, and that's never changed. So we decided to completely self-fund the business. That's something we did at the beginning. And at that time, my husband and I decided to take a second mortgage out on our house. And really, I went 22 months without any income to our household and a second mortgage to fund the business out of the profits. So you can imagine it was a really challenging time. Personally, we didn't have any children at that time, and he was working, so it kind of gave us a little bit of leeway, but all my eggs were in this Salo basket to make it work. So let's see where that got us. I'm going to take you through a little bit of our journey. This is our actual journey. Salo, I kind of put it into 4 different categories, as you see, and I'll kind of take you through them. So the first is the early growth. Salo took off like a rocket. In the first 3 years, Salo went from 0 to 21 million in 3 years. During those 3 years, on a personal note, I had 3 children, a boy when Salo was 10 months old, and 2 years later, twins. So one article that was written early was I was pregnant for 18 of the first 36 months of the business. And then we continued to grow to a peak of 47 million in just 7 years. So what I will tell you is the highs were high. We were celebrated in the media. I was a young woman entrepreneur, barely 30 when we started Salo. As you heard, some of the awards that we have, it was addictive and insane. That's the only way I can describe it from what I remember. It's so much going on. We also started 4 additional businesses during that time, thinking that we were being entrepreneurial, but honestly, we were just being scattered, kind of thinking like, oh, if this goes so well, why don't we start something else? Why don't we start something else? I would characterize that time as really a stereotypical young startup, undisciplined, almost even like a frat house. Like there was just, it was a ton of fun. And it also was really, really scary most of the time. It was a lot of hard work. And then I think there was a lot of luck in it too. If you remember the year after the 9/11, it's when Sarbanes-Oxley came in. People were looking for more accounting services. They were looking at other things. And so I think a little bit of luck, a lot of hard work, hope and vision were the things that kind of get us. So in 2009, you will see the recession hit. And I think it hit us harder than it had to. We were not prepared. We just weren't. We had never had a flat day. We had never had a flat week before the recession. We went from growing every single week to a really steep decline. We dropped almost 20% immediately, and then to a final 2-year decline of about 30% of our business. And I will tell you, those days were dark for many reasons. If you remember, John and I came from pretty humble beginnings. And so getting used to that rise in the media and everything else and making money for the first time and being successful kind of wasn't always, didn't really treat our egos as well as maybe they should. We started fighting. We started to really not get along, and really not only did we not know what to do, we didn't know where to turn. And as many do, instead of turning inside to sort of figure out what do I need to do differently, kind of turned on each other. So like with everything, things change, but what would be our path? And I think a lot of this is we were trying to be really, I don't know how to say it, we were trying to be really good for our employees. But one of the lessons that I learned is when you are pretty vulnerable and authentic normally, you can't hide behind a lens of something that's really going on. And we needed to do something. People were seeing it in us. Our numbers were bad. So I really account for 3 things that we did differently during the recession that helped bring us out to what you can now see was more of a sustainable growth. The first and foremost, we hired a coach to work on us as partners. And we started to grow not only as humans ourselves, but also leaders. Secondly, we put together an advisory board. So that is one thing I wish I would have done earlier in the business for sure, is get a group of people around. The cohorts are great. And then how do you take that to even an advisory board of people who are invested in your business for the long term? So when issues do come up, they're there to bounce somebody off of, or bounce ideas off of. And then the third, don't laugh, or if you do, maybe shut down your camera. But we put in the very first Salo strategic plan, complete with the foundation of mission, vision, and values. And I'm going to flip to those quickly. This was instrumental for us. I mean, absolutely, positively instrumental to have a mission. Now, all of these things existed in our company before, but we didn't have ways to talk about it. And now, when we go back to see the intentional growth, what I will tell you is our mission and our values and our vision are what we use as a foundation to be able to get this next piece of sustainable growth. So back to our intentional growth, we set a new vision for ourselves that we would be on a path forward. And so one of the things that happened in the recession is we just kept saying, can we get back? Can we get back? Can we get back to where we were? And that was creating like a level of stuckness that we couldn't move. You know, it just was not allowing us to move forward. And then one day, what if we just sort of said, what if we don't try to get back, but what if we try to move forward? What would it look like if we moved in a different path? And one thing that John and I said that kind of brought us together is we were looking to be on a path to transition our own leadership to somebody else to have more of a professionally managed company in the future. We knew that we wanted to continue to own Salo long term. And to do that and to get the growth that we wanted as owners of the company, that we needed to bring in more people around us who are more who had gone at more professionally led companies, who had had different experiences that would allow us to be able to see things that we couldn't see ourselves. And we thought that would take 3 years. So in 2010, we were sitting there and we're like, okay, in 3 years, we're going to have this transition. It actually took 7 to be able to get to that. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But this time's our moves coming out of that recession were incredibly purposeful. They were purposeful on people, on systems, and on processes. And we started to build for our future. You can see that our growth was not as fast, but it was more predictable. It was more sustainable. It wasn't as wild. We had a lot of things that backed it up, and it wasn't as volatile as that we said that was than it was before. I always said that we were building something to prepare for the following recession, and that we were going to be prepared for this next one. And, you know, this year I have been able to test that theory, and I'll tell you, it's been, we've come out of it much stronger. We had a much stronger foundation going in. And so it definitely, although it hasn't been the most fun, there's been a lot of really nice things that have come out of this last year. So now let's talk about our future. The future of Salo is now scaling to a different level. After 17 years of running Salo, I transitioned the presidency and the CEO position in December of 2018. Salo has predominantly serviced the Midwest through our 2 offices in Minneapolis and Chicago, and now we intend to scale it to a national business. So we've been very intentional about this, and the next move, we've reconstituted our board, and we've been incredibly happy with the results. And other than a brief setback earlier this year, we do believe that our next vision will come true. And that came because the owners have said that we need other people around us. And we'll talk about this in a little bit. That's hard for an ego. You know, I'd like to say I'm the only one that could possibly take this company as big as it needs to go. But as you'll hear later, there's many times that I realize by sort of letting go, I'm able to go further. So we talked a little bit about mission, vision, values, and I want to take you to, that's kind of the Salo story. We're excited for our future. I'm going to take you to some learnings. Excuse me while I'll take a little drink of water. So sometimes I can hear some feedback from somebody. So if you wouldn't mind putting yourself on mute till we get to the Q&A, that would be great. One, I might be a slow study, but I feel like my learnings in 3 areas have come over and over. It's like, how many times do I have to learn this? And the first one is about just sort of loving my work. And the second one is about fear and how fear plays into decision making that we make. And it's good for motivation, but not necessarily for decision making. And the 3 is really about intentionality and intentionality in our execution. So let me give you a few things. First, we're going to talk about love, loving your work. And running a business and starting a business is a full life journey. It for sure, excuse me. It absolutely, positively can be all encompassing. And one of the things when I have gotten stuck over time, I always come back to loving my work. And when I am in a flow and when it's going well, it's because I'm doing more of the things that I love. So I always sort of have this thing like, if you don't love your work, you got to change it. And if you can't change it for some reason, then you have to change your mindset around it. And it's incredibly hard. And I think one of the hardest things is to recognize when you're stuck, or for me, to recognize when I'm stuck. And every time that I've gotten stuck or the business has gotten stuck, it's because I'm not doing the work that I love. So it feels like I'm grinding and there's no flow. And this is actually easier to see in others than it is in yourself. And that's one reason why I really love these peer groups, because if you have a thoughtful person that has seen you over time and seen you in a flow, and they would be really willing to tell you like, hey, it feels like you're a little stuck. It's kind of good to have that and be able to see it in yourself. So here's a few things that I've done. So when my twins were born in 2005, and we had 3 children, 2 and under. As I said earlier, the business was going like crazy. At this time, I was Salo's CFO, payroll clerk, co-lead salesperson. I mean, you get the point. And during those early weeks with the twins, in one day, I realized I could only do 3 or 4 things. if I check email, take a shower, work out, or nap. And I was forced to prioritize, because if I wanted a shower and a nap, I had to say, like, am I going to do email or try to get healthy again? What were these things? And so it was just so much. And with this intense need from the business, it was just really overwhelming. So how did I do it? I actually took a little time and I made 2 lists. I made one list. What does the business need? And then secondly, I made a list and said, what do I love to do? And I started to map those out. And there were true needs of the business. And I can't always get away from those. But what I realized, if I could start to prioritize the things and spend those times in a day around the things that I like, and to start to solve for the rest. So what was one of those things? For example, I realized if I could spend time talking with a potential client or a potential employee versus getting payroll processed, my time was better spent for the business doing that. And quite frankly, I liked it better. And so when I felt the joy of the work, then it was easier maybe at night to do some of those other things. And so I'm not saying this is always possible. Okay. This is a really hard thing to do. But for those things that I couldn't get rid of, it made it easier to change my mindset around it when I felt that it was intentional and a choice I was making versus something that was happening to me. This happened again during the recession. I was clearly not my best self. I was stuck. I was angry. I kept feeling like there was so much to do and only I could do it. Nobody else could. I was the only one and I had to be there. And I was really feeling sorry for myself. And I will tell you, that was hard to get out of. And I mentioned I thought I was hiding it from my employees, and I think they saw through it. And we saw it, and it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We're only as strong as our weakest player, and when the leader is weak, we see it in the results. So what made the difference? One day, someone smart said to me from one of my peer groups, what would you do if you could? Not what do you have to do, what would you do? And it just sort of spurred something in me. And I kind of went back to the time when I had those 3 young kids. I said, what if I did prioritize? What if I did it differently? And again, I sat out and I made 2 lists. What does the business really need right now? Not just what was I telling myself it needed, not just what I was saying, like, oh, I have to be there, but then also really what was the work that was bringing me joy. And so it took a long time to solve for this. This isn't something that you put those things together and then the next day it changes. Our business was hemorrhaging, so we didn't have the resources, we didn't have the money, but I set my mindset on a path of hope to do something differently. And so slowly it started to turn. And I didn't even know if my work really changed, but my mind around it had, and that made all the difference for our company. I focused on the work that I loved and I solved for the rest. So I'll give you a quick little example. I love new salespeople. I love working with them. I love the hope. I love the change that they get from not sure they can sell to their first sale. Like, that's really awesome for me. Where I'm really not as good, and it's actually super draining, is sort of mid-manager level. I think part of it is I was never a mid-manager in a company. I'd never gone through it myself, and I'm not very good. And so what I had found is I had all levels of responsibility. And so how I started to solve for that, it was like, okay, and part of the reason I had all levels is because I really wanted access to kind of our sales teams and our young people who were starting and trying to do this. But when I started to solve for it, I'm like, they're not getting what they need because I'm not the one to deliver. And so how we restructured the organization was more helped me be able to focus on the things that I like. And I still was able to have access there, but I put in a different layer that really helped the success of the business. So hopefully that makes sense as an example. And what's funny is if you ask someone in your company, what they love to do, you almost always find something that, or someone who likes to do the work that you don't. So I really think on starting this way. So I have this as a normal, every year on my half birthday now, over the years, I start this list. And so now I just do it all the time. So what's bringing me energy? What is the work that I'm loving? What's draining me? Why is it draining me? What are the themes are in this? What do I need to get rid of this year? And again, some years it's the exact same stuff all the time that I don't get rid of. Whose fault is that? Probably mine. But then other times it's really, I'm able to morph and change more into those things, being intentional about that. Now I'm going to go to fear. And this is a huge one. We could probably talk the entire time on this. Fear is a good motivator, for sure it is. When your house is on a second mortgage to start your business, that's good tension, that's good fear. But decisions made based on fear are really bad. So I have had many of those. And when I think about being scared, it's like when I'm scared of change. And, I've obviously counseled many CEOs, people changes over the years. That's one, the fear of the change. One, when I'm scared of losing what I already have. And third, being scared that if I give it up, I won't be relevant anymore. So let me talk a little bit about this. So we talked what Salo does, right? We do accounting, finance, and human resources, staffing, and consulting work. Okay. So we help companies find financial talent. We bridge gaps and help them get their teams to the next level. I have literally helped companies, thousands and thousands of companies, with their transitions of their CFO and of their controller. So you might think I'd be an expert in it, right? But what I'll tell you is it's easier to help someone else than help myself. When it came down to it, the fear of the pain of change is greater than the fear of status quo. And when that happens, it usually creates a sticking point. And when I'm working with other CEOs, I can tell they're afraid of the change. And so I spend a lot of my time painting the picture of what a new CFO could be and what it's like, and to kind of get them like, hey, there is a difference, and it might be painful to get through, but the outcome is much better. So you think I'd be able to see it myself. Coming out of our recession, our CFO and finance team had been super critical to us at the time. Our CFO had put in a lot of rigor, a lot of process, a lot of systems that we had really never had before in that crazy growth time. The CFO had given us visibility to the financials, our tax situations, an annual plan that was instrumental in our growth. And we were addicted to the results and the rigor. The actual work being done was spotless. So addicted that, in fact, we ignored the continued clash that the finance team had with the culture of the organization. And we let it go on too long. And many problems arose. We lost many other talented individuals. Our sales team lost confidence in the partnership with finance. And quite frankly, they lost a little confidence in us as leaders. And so by the time we finally made the decision, it was way, way worse than if we would have made it early. And I think back to it and go, gosh, why don't we do it? And it was like, what is the change? How am I comfortable in the status quo? And what is that fear of change? We've also had sales leadership changes. So when John and I started the business, we were the main salespeople. I would assume many of you are your main salespeople as well. And we tried to transition sort of the leader of the sales 3 times from our baby business, like the first one that we started. We transitioned it 3 times before it worked. The first 2 times we brought someone in from the outside. The first time we were too micromanaging. We were fearful that if we stepped too far away, it wouldn't work. And we also let the sales team reinforce our egos. They would say things like, it's just not the same without you. I came to work for you. No one is as good as you. And I'll tell you, getting my ego fed feels good, still feels good. And yet it was limiting because not being able to transition the sales team was limiting our growth. We couldn't bring somebody in to run it. We couldn't do other things. And so the second time, we thought we learned our lesson and from our first failure. So we stepped away. We're like, sorry, team, we're out. And this is your new leader. Because obviously we were afraid of making the same mistake. I'm not sure the second leader would have ever worked regardless, but nevertheless, it didn't. And there were a couple of things that happened. One, we stepped too far away. There was a culture misfit. And so you can imagine it felt terrible. We're like, this is never going to happen. This was probably over a period of about 2.5, 3 years. And, you know, again, that's where you get into, I'm stuck. I'm not doing the work that I like. I have all these things and I'm unable to transition this. So finally we decided we needed to grow someone from the inside for that particular role. I'm a firm believer that some roles are good to bring in fresh perspective from the outside, and sometimes you just need to grow them from inside. And trying to understand that over time has been really, really helpful. It took longer than we wanted, and it still wasn't easy. So the year after we promoted the leader that has now been successful, our top 2 salespeople who made up 25% of our revenue quit. They just said, I'm not working for him. And so that was difficult. As you can imagine, we thought it was dying. So we had to decide, do we support our new leader and stick to the plan, or do we have a third failure? And I'm happy to say that the group is stronger than ever. And having 2 people leave actually made us refocus on the things. It was a slight setback, but help us refocus. And I believe we're stronger today because of it. So third, I want to talk about is intention and execution. You are your company and your company is you. I'm my company is me. I get to decide what gets attention, and it's a big responsibility. So many people from the outside go, oh my gosh, you're your own boss. You get to decide. And I would also say it's kind of some of the hardest things that we do because you do get to decide. As I said, that during the recession of 2008, we put in Salo's first strategic plan. It was a foundational move that has truly set the course for us. And we use this as a filter for every move we make as a company. We use it for evaluating performance of the company and of the employees. Our mission of connecting people to make a difference is our true why. We ask ourselves, is this the move we want to make to satisfy our mission? We have 6 company values, and we use those values we ask ourselves, are we behaving in accordance with these values? And finally, we ask a third question is, does this help achieve our vision? And so all the intentionality behind decisions have a filter through our mission, vision, and values. And that intention has made a big, big difference in our company. I mentioned our transition of Salo's leadership. I worked on that for 7 years. Each move was intentional. For example, Lisa came into our company as the Chief Talent Officer. She ended up overseeing all the back office functions of Salo. And we knew she needed experience on the delivery side. So we had her take a lateral role as Chief Operations Officer. Each move was built on the other. And multiple things. John and I co-led the company for a number of years. And then we moved I ran the company because we were trying to get the team used to one leader. So it wasn't that big of a transition when Lisa took over. So I'll tell you, it was incredibly intentional. Each move took longer than we expected, but I'm happy to say that that worked. So we're also very intentional about our brand, how it's represented in print form, and how you interact with it. And so an example of this is, if you ever do get to come to our office, which I hope one day, we are on the tail side of this pandemic and we get to see each other in person again. You will be greeted by our first impressions officer with a great big smile in your name. It's important for us that every interaction you have with our brand has some of the same energy and passion behind it. So I'm going to end a little bit with gratitude. It is more powerful, I always feel, to have intention in what we do versus than it is to have an expectation of the outcome. And I think about it, my intentions in life become more powerful when I'm thankful for big and small things. So one of the things that I've done over the years is put in a way to be grateful every day. And when I find myself in a rut or down or feel like things that are not going my own way, I know how to get out of it. And that is to usually put good in the world. So I'd like to end with a little gratitude. I am super thankful that I've been able to live my business dreams so far. I'm thankful to have created an organization where people love their work and enjoy the culture. I'm grateful for our employees who put their careers in our hands and who do such great work, and that we get to do more of it. I'm thankful for our clients who trust us to solve some really big issues that they have. I'm thankful for continuous learning and growth. I'm thankful for you for listening for me today and for having me. So with that, I think we will go off slide presentation and move into Q&A.